Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. So last week I put up a video talking about the Predator versus the Leman Russ, and I put forward the argument again. I did it in 7th edition, I did it again as a follow-up video for 8th edition, why I think the Predator has a good chance of replacing the Leman Russ as the Imperial Guard, go-to battle tank. Now, a lot of people sort of agreed, disagreed, but one thing that really, which is I love the discussion, and I love you guys getting involved in the channel. I love it when I post a video up and I, sneakily check on it at work, and it's blown up and there's like 20, 30, 40 comments. It's like, yes, great, love it. That means that there's back and forth, people are commenting, discussion, great. That's how we get better, by discussing, by sharing ideas. So I don't mind if you agree or disagree with me on whether you think the Predator should replace the Leman Russ. I don't mind, that's fine. Go. Put forward your reasons why you think the Leman Russ should stay. Put forward your reasons why you think the Predator should move in, That's fine. But one thing I notice a lot of people getting hung up on is this whole comment that I said about there not being a huge difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8. And enough people said it that I feel like it is worthy of me doing a follow-up video. Because I don't think people necessarily understood the point that I was making, or why I was making it. So people were basically saying there is a huge difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8. Toughness 7 models get wounded by things like bolters on a 5+, things like autocannons on a 4+, and there were people were basically the number one thing that they were saying was toughness 7 is much more susceptible to small arms fire. And there were people arguing about, strength 8 weapons. Obviously, there's a huge difference there as well. And it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Before I start to let me say, I think there is a big difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8. But I don't think there's a huge difference between having a toughness 7 Predator and a toughness 8 Leman Russ. Now, you guys might be thinking, oh, well, that just doesn't make sense. You've just said there is a big difference, but now you're saying there isn't. Let me explain. Whilst there is a big difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8, in theory, between these abstract values of just taking a toughness 7 value and taking a toughness 8 value, yes, there is a big difference. Small arms are doubly as likely to do damage to you. I understand that and I accept that. But we're not talking, or at the time I wasn't talking about an abstract value. I was talking about a Predator and I was talking about a Leman Russ. I wasn't talking about toughness 7 versus toughness 8. I was talking about a Predator and the Leman Russ. Now, you guys might be thinking, well, that's splitting hairs, but it's not. And let me explain. When I made the comment about there not being a huge difference between the Predator toughness 7 and the Leman Russ toughness 8, I was talking about actual practical experience, practicalities on the battlefield. I was talking about what I have discovered, what I have found. And it all comes down to the battlefield role that both of these vehicles would play in an Imperial Guard army. They would both units are designed to sit back and provide long-range fire support whilst our waves of infantry move on the enemy or either defend them from, a huge offensive. But the majority of the time, our infantry is going to be pushing forward, putting pressure on the enemy. Our blocks of conscripts, our waves of infantry plasma squads, they're going to be pushing up, getting in the enemy's face, drawing the attention of the enemy. So when you take these two factors into account, the whole not a big difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8 starts to make a lot more sense. Because when you've got to realise is the Predator and the Leman Russ are going to be sat at the back of the battlefield. They're going to be providing long-range fire support. They're not going to be on the front lines. They're not going to be up close and down and dirty with your opponents. The only time you're really going to want to move them is if you need to, for some reason make a late-game objective grab for the vehicle. You need to, order a Leman Russ to go full throttle. You know, that's the only time, and I've only done that once in all my games of 8th edition so far. 30, 40 games of 8th edition. I've only had to use a Leman Russ to grab an objective once. So I'm not going to build a whole strategy. I'm not going to make a whole argument about, you know, that idea. No, most of the time our vehicles are going to sit back either on home objectives or just at the back, on the back line, slinging out 48-inch, 72-inch long-range firepower. Now, because of that, what that means is you're very, very, very rarely going to take small arms fire on your Leman Russes, on your Predators, for two reasons. One, you're far away. You're out of range. Most of the time, you're going to be out, you know, your opponent's going to be out of range to put down serious levels of bolter fire, if we're using bolters as an example. I mean, let's be honest about this. If your opponent is able to level serious levels of bolter fire against your vehicles, against your backfield support, long-range support vehicles, something's gone wrong. He must have, you know, you mustn't have brought enough infantry, or, you know, just something has gone wrong. Because let's be honest, especially with how cheap Imperial Guard infantry is at the moment, and especially with how difficult people are finding to deal with it, he's going to be pouring every bolt, shot, bolt, pistol, grenade, spoon, mess tin, and entrenching tool. He's going to be throwing everything in the kitchen sink into your infantry, because that's what's going to be pushing onto him. That's what's going to be in his face. That's what he's going to have to deal with the endless waves of first rank fire, the endless waves of plasma. That's what he's going to have to deal with. So if he won't be pouring. You know, we know this. You know, you guys will experience as well if you've got that sweet 150 infantry plus 3 or 4 tanks pushing on your enemy. You know that he's pouring all his small arms into your infantry. If he is dedicating, you know, if he's firing like a tactical squad and with, you know, it's got like a las cannon, he's firing the whole thing into your tank, then whatever. But I don't consider one tactical squad's worth of firepower, you know, with the bolters, something that I should, you know, seriously keep in mind when it comes to me picking my units. No. So that's what I mean. So you guys are far, that's my 2 points there. You guys are far enough back that it's going to be very difficult for him to leverage that amount of firepower. You know, serious bolt weapons into your vehicle. I mean, at most, if somehow you fucked up your deployment and he manages to deep strike a squad of termies within, you know, tactical termies within 9 inches, within 12 inches of your tank, and he's putting out 4 shots per termies, okay, fair enough, that's, you know, between 60 and 20 bolt shots, then that's alright. But then, realistically, if you've got 150 infantry on the board and your opponent deep strikes down 5% Terminators or with Storm Bolters, is he going to pour that bolt fire into your tanks, or is he going to pour that bolt fire into your infantry waves? You know, I know which one he's realistically going to fire at. So that's what it comes down to. You're either out of range, or your opponent is going to be using his small arms to kill your infantry. Now, against bigger stuff, against big weapons, anti-tank weapons, the whole difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8 argument does start to become a little bit more relevant, and I am willing to give way on this. I am willing to accept a bit of pushback. For example, overcharged plasma, you know, that's got a 24-inch threat range. I'm willing to accept that. You know, I'm willing to accept that there's a 16%, you know, there is a difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8 there. Regular plasma, you know, strength 7 weapons. When you think about it, there aren't really a lot of strength 7 weapons. And if your opponent isn't, what you've got to remember is not a lot of people, well, I guess most people have access to overcharging plasma now. But if someone shoots an unovercharged plasma shot at my Predator, I'm not really that bothered about it. It's 1 damage. It's only got a 50-50 chance of doing that damage to me. You know, I'm not too bothered about it. Overcharged plasma, I will give back. I will say, yeah, toughness 7, toughness 8 makes a huge difference there. On a Predator, on a Leman Russ. Melter. This is an interesting one, because it kind of, I'm going to link back to my other argument, which is, if the enemy has managed to get melter guns in range of your long distance support units, something's gone wrong. Why didn't you deploy your big anti-deep strike bubble of bullshit with the conscripts. You know, why didn't you... You know, that's the only time when Melter is going to realistically get into range, get into threat. You know, as an Imperial Guard player, at 2,000 points, which is what we're talking about here, you should realistically be able to fill your deployment zone quite easily, and most of that's going to be filled with infantry. And that's going to pretty much stop all deep striking Melter. And if someone manages to slog it all the way up the board on foot with a Melter gun and blow up one of your long distance tanks, then I ain't even mad. You know, it's unrealistic. It's not something you want to build a whole strategy around. Some people might argue Rhino Rush. Well, again, he's going to jump. You know, if you've done your job properly, your tanks are going to be far enough back that his Melter is going to struggle to get into range. And there is pretty much, thinking about all the deployment zones, there is pretty much no excuse for allowing your units to be melted. You know, it's just not going to happen. I know it seems like, oh, it's just not going to happen. It sounds like a bit of a, you know, a way of just passing it off, just brushing it off. But I'm talking from my experience here, guys. Like, the only things that have managed to threaten my long-range firepower units is my opponent's long-range firepower units when we've been dueling. That's the only thing. This short-range anti-tank shouldn't be able to, if you've done your job right, shouldn't be able to get anywhere near your vehicles. So I've conceded the plasma point. I've disagreed with the small arms point. I kind of disagree with the Melter point. But going on to long-range firepower. Now, this is where there is a difference. Okay. This is where I'm going to have to give some points, I'm going to take some points. So, as we all know, I think no one disagrees with me on this. Las cannons are going to wreck a Predator as easily as they're going to wreck a Lean Russ. There's no disagreement between us there. I'm willing to accept that. What it comes down to is strength 8 weapons. Long range strength 8 weapons. Let's go through them in sort of common occurrence. You know, how likely you are to come across these things. Number 1, the missile launcher. Now, the missile launcher in the fluff is one of the most common anti-tank weapons employed by the Imperium. Because, you know, the people you're going to come across using it are going to be other Guard players or Space Marine players. You know, there are some of the factions which, you know, do use missile launchers. You know, like Orcs, for example, they've got rocket launchers. But Orc long-range anti-tank has always been a bit of a joke. It's not something that you should ever really consider to be worrying about when we're talking about long-range anti-tank units. But the thing is that not a lot of people use missile launchers. I know it sounds like a strange one, but especially if you go on the internet, and from the experience that I've had, it's people don't like the missile launcher because you're paying the same price for a las cannon, but the las cannon is ultimately so much better. You know, no one sits there and goes, "Ooh, I better take the missile launcher because it's better against those toughness 7 targets." They go, no. And no one takes a missile launcher because, you know, for the anti-infantry role. If people want to take anti-infantry devastators, for example, they'll take heavy bolter ones. They won't take missile launcher ones. So I've only ever come across in 8th edition so far one guy using missile launchers, and he had 2 missile launchers and 2 las cannons, and that's just because what he got in like the devastator box, I think, and he was going to get in the devastator box so he could get 2 more las cannons. He was on, you know, I haven't come across any missile launchers in 8th edition, and maybe that's just me, maybe that's just my meta, but that's what I'm trying to get across. Like, I play in a really competitive meta. Like, they all go to tournaments. A lot of them travel around. All the guys travel around the country going to different tournaments. You know, really high skill level. So that's what when I talk about, you know, my tactics, my choices, what I would do, is to that skill level. I'm not really there taking into account, you know, Johnny Rocket Random Boy who turns up with 50 missile launchers list because he just loves missiles. You know, you can never really take that into account when we're talking about general tactics. So that's why I don't really count the missile launcher, because it's not as good as the las cannon. It's just flat out not as good. And if someone's taking anti-tank choices, they're going to be taking las cannons, not missile launchers. But in the interest of fairness, in the interest of, you know, Compromise, I will concede the point that missile launchers are better against Predators than they are against Leman Russes. Okay? But in practical terms, you're more likely to come across las cannons than you are to come across missile launchers. Next one that people brought up is Eldar Lancers. Yeah, okay. I will concede, Eldar Lancers, that's the one specific example that I would use that, where I would say, like, okay, yeah, the long-range firepower Lancers are better against Predators, no doubt. No, no discussion there. My only counter argument would be I have never, I think I've come across one Bright Lance in all of 7th and 8th edition. People just don't seem to use Eldar Bright Lances. I'm not entirely sure why, but people just don't seem to use them. So, people they tend to use other things like shuriken stuff and scatter stuff. Eldar players for a long time have never really been about one shot popping you, and they've always been about grinding you down with like scatter bikes and shuri bikes and all that kind of stuff. For a long time, Eldar have been about grinding you down with their long range, fast moving weapons rather than the one shot pop sort of approach. Dark Eldar, on the other hand, Dark Eldar, especially with the way their new rules work with their Dark Lancers, Dark Eldar have always, had a good thing going with the Dark Lance. I know a lot of Dark Eldar players don't take Ravagers though, and most of them take, Blasterborn in Venoms, but the local Dark Eldar player around these parts has been running 6 Ravagers, 3 with Disintegrators, 3 with Dark Lancers, and he's been doing quite well. So I will concede, if you're going against Dark Eldar, you want Leman Russes over Predators. End of discussion. The last sort of strength 8 long range big boom anti-tank weapon I want to talk about is the Battle Cannon. More specifically, Imperial Knights. Now, you see, Imperial Knights are quite a common tournament army. They're very easy for tournament players to build up, paint, and get going with. I know a lot of these big sort of teams that goes like ETC and all that, which one of their guys just travels around with it in the back of his car, 3 or 4 nights. And if someone drops out and they need someone who can fill in but hasn't got an army, they just have that night list, and they just submit that night list. It's no worries, and someone will fill in. And we're talking about the rapid fire battle cannon, the Imperial Knight. Yes, the battle cannon the Imperial Knight battle cannon will kind of do less damage to a Leman Russ because of the strength 8 for toughness 8. But what I found in practical terms, especially considering so many players run like battle cannon, Gatling cannon knights now, very few players run them with the chainsword or bother with the chainswords, the big Reaper chainswords. What I found is most Imperial Knights. What I found is if an Imperial Knight player wants one of your Leman Russes dead, or wants one of your long range tanks dead, it makes very little difference to him whether it's a Predator or a Leman Russ, because he'll be putting out. He's got 3 or 4 Knight battle cannons, and they're gonna fire like 4d6 shots or 2d6 shots, and each one does d3 wounds. And I've had it. Generally speaking, I found that it takes 1 to 2 Knights to just blow up a Leman Russ. So it's only going to take 1 to 2 Knights to blow up a Predator as well. So again, it doesn't really make a difference against Imperial Knights if you're a Predator, if you're a Leman Russ, just because they put out so much battle cannon shots that it really doesn't matter. Especially with the Gatling cannon. The Gatling cannon's got an equal chance of finishing both tanks off. Predator or Leman Russ. So there you go, guys. So hopefully that explains. I know this has gone on longer than I wanted to. I actually only want to be like a 10-15 minute video, but hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from now. I didn't mean there isn't a huge difference between toughness 7 and toughness 8. I meant there isn't a huge difference between toughness 7 on a Predator and toughness 8 on a Leman Russ, in that the battlefield role they play and the kind of weapons that are going to beat them. So my argument is that, you know, Predators and Leman Russes, you don't really want to be taking into account their resistance to small arms fire, because in the Imperial Guard they should very, very rarely be coming under small arms fire. All that small arms fire should be directed at the bulk of your infantry. And likewise against long range anti-tank, you know, there's a lot of choices out there which are just which are sort of like net list choices. People are going to go for las cannons, you know, and rapid fire battle cannons don't really care whether you're to 7 toughness 8 just because the amount of damage those two weapons put out. But I will concede that missile launchers and Eldar lance weapons are much better at killing Predators than they are at killing Leman Russes. I'm just not sure, you know, with the missile launcher being such a subpar weapon in comparison to the las cannon, that a lot of tournament lists aren't going to be running it. I'm just not sure if I'm willing to take into account, you know, seriously, a single faction's and long range anti-tank to influence my entire decision. I don't really want to be there going, oh, I might come across Dark Lancers in this 5 games this tournament. You know, Dark Elders aren't that common. So I'm not sure I really want to take that into account when I'm building my tournament list. You know, I want to take a take-all-comers list, and when it comes down to it, I personally feel that the Predator and the Leman Russ, there isn't, you know, the Predator is probably superior to the Leman Russ when it comes to a take-all-comers tank. However, the Leman Russ in the classic setup, as in this picture, could be argued that that's a superior generalist tank. So what I'm going to sign off on is, I think that it can be argued that the Predator and the Leman Russ are equal. You know, one is slightly less durable against some weapons, but puts out a lot more damage. You know, 4 las cannons puts out a lot of damage, whilst one puts out less damage, but can take more of a beating. So if you think of it that way, they are equal, right? Here comes the kicker though. Predator's cheaper. So if we look at it as both tanks being an equally good choice, why would you take the more expensive one? Why wouldn't you take the cheaper Predator? If both are meant to be equal, why wouldn't you save yourself 50, 60 points and take a Predator? Food for thought. Tell me what you think. As always, discussions, comments. I want to know what you guys are thinking. Tell me if you still disagree with me. Tell me if you go, oh yeah, Morning Glory, I can't see where you're coming from now. Yes, there is a difference to 7 to 8, but maybe it doesn't apply to this with the battlefield role these units are playing. Maybe. If you disagree with me, that's great. No issues with disagreement. I want you to put your thoughts, put your comments, put your arguments down there. Go out and play, test some games, you know, proxy some Leman Russes as Predators, and come back and put in the comments and say, actually, you were wrong. I've gone and play tested it. Actually, you are wrong. There, you know, I've noticed it. I've played 5 games. Every single game, I was there wishing I was toughness 8. If that's the case, I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept that. So, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, and I'll see you guys next time.